August 5, 1945. Evening. J. Robert Oppenheimer stands on a hill in New Mexico, watching the sun go down. He's 41 years old, chain smoker, thin as a rail. In 24 hours, he will become the most powerful human being who ever lived, and he already knows it's going to destroy him. 3 years earlier, a letter arrived on President Roosevelt's desk. It was signed by Albert Einstein, the most famous scientist in the world. But here's what most people don't know. Einstein didn't write most of it. He just signed it, because his name carried weight that the actual authors didn't. The letter said, Germany might be building an atomic bomb. If they succeed first, they win the war. Maybe they win everything. Roosevelt read it twice, then a third time. Then he made a decision that would kill hundreds of thousands of people and arguably save millions more. But this isn't a story about a bomb. This is a story about a race that we didn't know we'd already won. A weapon built to stop an enemy who had already given up. And a moment when the smartest people in the world realized they'd created something they couldn't control. Because here's the part they don't teach you in school. This wasn't a race to build a weapon. It was a race against a decision no one wanted to make. Let me ask you a question. What really caused the atomic bomb? If you said scientific genius, you're not wrong. If you said World War II, you're not wrong either. But the real answer is simpler and darker. Fear. The fear that someone else would build it first. The fear that we'd lose if we didn't act. The fear that once it was possible, it became inevitable. The history books tell you this was a race between the Allies and Nazi Germany. Brilliant scientists working day and night to stop Hitler from getting the ultimate weapon. That story is clean, heroic, easy to understand. Here's the problem. It's not entirely true. Germany gave up on building an atomic bomb in 1942. Their top physicist, Werner Heisenberg, concluded it wasn't practical, too expensive, too difficult. They shifted resources to rockets instead, the V2 program. But Allied intelligence didn't know that, so America kept building. Faster, bigger, 100,000 people working in secret, $2 billion, the most expensive project in human history at that time. And here's why this matters today, because the same pattern keeps repeating. We build dangerous things not because we want to, but because we're terrified someone else will build them first. AI, bioweapons, surveillance tech. The psychology hasn't changed, but this isn't the part written in textbooks. Summer 1939. Albert Einstein is on vacation. He's 60 years old, world famous, and mostly retired from active physics. He's done his part. EMC Quatre, relativity. He wants to sail boats and play violin. Then a younger physicist named Leo Szilard shows up at his cottage. Szilard is terrified. He's a Hungarian Jew who fled the Nazis. He's been running calculations, and he's realized something horrifying. Einstein's old equations, the ones about mass and energy, could be used to build a bomb that destroys entire cities. Worse, Nazi Germany has the scientists, the resources, and the motivation to try it. Einstein listens. He does the math in his head, and he realizes Szilard is right. Now here's the relatable part. Imagine you discover that something you created, something you thought was just elegant science, could be weaponized, and the people most likely to weaponize it are the same people murdering your friends and family back in Europe. What do? Einstein agreed to sign a letter to President Roosevelt, but he didn't write most of it. Szilard did, because Szilard knew Einstein's name would get the letter read. It worked. Roosevelt took the threat seriously. He quietly began funding nuclear research. Short-term win. The U.S. government started paying attention to atomic science. Hidden cost. Einstein became the public face of a weapon he morally opposed. He would later call signing that letter the one great mistake of my life. But here's the catch most people miss. Einstein was both right and wrong. Right, because the bomb brought unfathomable destruction. Wrong, because if he hadn't signed, if America had ignored the threat, and Germany had succeeded, you wouldn't be watching this video. And this is where history quietly changed direction. The Manhattan Project is now in full swing. Thousands of people recruited, secret facilities being built across the country. The mission beat Nazi Germany to the bomb. But here's what almost no one knew at the time. Germany had already lost the race. Not because they were behind, because they'd stopped trying. Werner Heisenberg, Germany's top nuclear physicist, had concluded that building an atomic bomb would require resources Germany didn't have, industrial capacity they couldn't spare, years they didn't have. So they pivoted, focused on rockets, on the V2 program. But Allied intelligence didn't know this. Reports kept coming in. Germany is working on atomic weapons. They're further along than we thought. If we don't act now, we lose. Most of those reports were based on fragments, misinterpretations, fear filling in the gaps. Think about it. You're a military intelligence officer in 1942. You hear the words Nazi and atomic bomb in the same sentence. What's the safe choice? Assume the threat is real. Mobilize everything. So America did. By 1943, the Manhattan Project employed over 100,000 people. Secret cities built in Tennessee, Washington, New Mexico, the most expensive military project in human history, all to win a race against an opponent who wasn't running anymore. Short-term win. The U.S. developed nuclear capability faster than anyone imagined possible. Hidden cost. Once you've spent $2 billion and employed 100,000 people to build a weapon, stopping becomes almost impossible, even if the original threat disappears. This decision solved one problem and created three more, because by the time we realized Germany wasn't a threat, we'd already built the bomb, and we'd built it too well to just put it away. Los Alamos, New Mexico, 1943. If you looked at a map, you wouldn't find it. If you asked the locals, they'd never heard of it, but 6,000 people lived there. J. Robert Oppenheimer was put in charge of designing the actual bomb. He was a theoretical physicist, brilliant, charismatic, and totally inexperienced in managing large projects. The military director, General Leslie Groves, didn't trust him at first. Oppenheimer was a left-wing intellectual who donated to communist causes before the war. Groves was a by-the-book army engineer who just finished building the Pentagon. They shouldn't have worked together, but they did, because they both understood the same thing. If this project failed, the consequences were unthinkable. Oppenheimer built a city in the desert. He recruited the best scientists in the world, physicists, chemists, engineers. Many of them were European refugees fleeing fascism. They brought their families. Their children went to schools that didn't officially exist. Mail was censored. No one could say where they lived. And here's the eerie part. Most of the workers didn't know what they were building. Compartmentalization. Each team worked on one small piece, enriching uranium, designing triggers, testing materials. Only a handful of people knew the full picture. Why? Security. If someone talked, they couldn't reveal what they didn't know. But there's a darker reason. If you don't know what you're building, you can't question whether you should be building it. Short-term win. The bomb design progressed faster than anyone thought possible. Brilliant minds, unlimited resources, zero oversight. Hidden cost, moral isolation. These scientists were inventing a weapon that could end human civilization. And they were doing it in a place where no one from the outside world could ask, wait, should we be doing this? By 1945, the bomb was nearly ready, and that's when the real problem started. July 16, 1945, 5:29 a.m. The first atomic bomb is mounted on a 100-foot steel tower in the New Mexico desert, codenamed the Gadget. Oppenheimer and the senior scientists watch from a bunker 10 miles away. Some put on welding goggles, some lie face down on the ground, some pray. Then, at 5:29 and 45 seconds, the world changes. A flash brighter than 1,000 suns. A fireball that vaporizes the steel tower instantly. A mushroom cloud that rises 7 miles into the sky. The shockwave hits the bunker. Windows rattle. The ground shakes. One scientist says out loud, "Now we're all sons of bitches." Oppenheimer later claimed he thought of a line from Hindu scripture. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." But here's what most people don't know. He said that years later in an interview. Not in the moment. In the moment, witnesses say he looked relieved, maybe even proud. The device worked. After 3 years, billions of dollars, 100,000 workers, it worked. They celebrated, shook hands, opened champagne someone had smuggled in. But within days, some of those same scientists started writing letters. Letters to President Truman. Letters begging him not to use the bomb on Japan. Leo Szilard, the same man who convinced Einstein to write the first letter, drafted a petition signed by 70 scientists. The bomb should be demonstrated, not used on civilians. Truman never saw the petition. It was blocked by military officials. Short-term win. The Manhattan Project succeeded. The weapon worked exactly as designed. Hidden cost. The scientists realized something that would haunt them forever. They'd built something that could never be unbuilt. And here's the part that changes everything. Germany had already surrendered. In May, 2 months before Trinity, Japan was losing. Their navy was destroyed. Their cities were being firebombed. Soviet forces were about to invade from the north. Some Japanese officials were already trying to negotiate surrender terms. And yet, let me tell you the story everyone thinks they know. President Truman faced an impossible choice: invade Japan and lose 1 million American soldiers, or drop the bomb and end the war immediately. He made the hard call, chose the bomb, saved lives. That story is clean, moral, defensible. But this doesn't mean what most people think it means, because here's what actually happened. There was no single meeting where everyone sat down and decided, yes, we're using the bomb. The decision was momentum. The bomb existed. The infrastructure existed. The orders were already moving through military channels. Plans for bombing raids on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were being finalized.
Truman was briefed, yes, but he wasn't presented with, should we use this? He was presented with, here's the target list. Some military leaders argued it wasn't necessary. General Eisenhower said he opposed it. Admiral Lee called it barbaric. Even some Manhattan Project scientists begged for alternatives. But the machine was already moving. Think about it. You've spent 3 years and $2 billion building a weapon. 100,000 people worked on it. The war is almost over, but Japan hasn't surrendered unconditionally. You test the bomb. It works. Now what? Do you say, actually, let's not use it, let's just tell everyone we built it and hope that's enough? No, because the pressure to justify the expense, the secrecy, the sacrifice, that pressure is enormous. Truman later said he never lost sleep over the decision, but his private writings tell a different story. He wrote about the weight of it, the horror of it, the necessity of it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The atomic bomb wasn't dropped because one man made a hard choice. It was dropped because once the weapon existed, once the orders were in motion, no single person had the authority or the will to stop it. The system decided, not the man. And this is where history stops being about heroes and villains and starts being about something much scarier. What happens when we build things we can't control? Section 8. Personalization. Let me ask you something. If you were Oppenheimer in July 1945, what would you have done? You've spent 3 years of your life building this weapon. You've recruited the best minds in the world. You've convinced them it was necessary, moral, urgent. Germany, the original reason you started, surrendered 2 months ago. But Japan is still fighting. Their military refuses to surrender unconditionally. American soldiers are dying in the Pacific every day. Your bomb works. It works perfectly. Military leaders say it will end the war and save lives. Some of your own scientists say using it will doom humanity. The orders are moving forward. You have no authority to stop them. Do you speak up? Do you stay silent? Do you resign in protest, knowing someone else will just take your place? What do you do? And here's the harder question. If you were born in 1904, raised in New York, saw fascism spreading across Europe, watched friends and colleagues flee for their lives, would you have done anything differently? It's easy to judge from 80 years in the future. It's harder when you're in the moment, when the threat feels real, when everyone around you says this is necessary. History doesn't repeat, but the psychology does. Section 9, closing. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. The Enola Gay drops little boy on Hiroshima. 70,000 people die instantly. Another 70,000 die from radiation in the following months. 3 days later, Nagasaki. Japan surrenders on August 15. The war is over, but the Manhattan Project, the thing it created, the precedent it set, that never ended. Here's the pattern. Fear drives innovation. Innovation creates power. Power creates weapons. Weapons create new fears. And the cycle repeats. After World War II, the Soviet Union built their own atomic bomb, then hydrogen bombs, then ICBMs, the arms race that defined the Cold War. Today, we're not racing to build atomic bombs. We're racing to build AI, gene editing technology, autonomous weapons, and the logic is exactly the same. If we don't build it, someone else will. If they get it first, we lose. We can't afford to be second. Oppenheimer spent his later years advocating for international control of nuclear weapons. He was labeled a security risk. His clearance was revoked. He died in 1967, haunted by what he'd helped create. Einstein spent his final years saying the letter he signed was the greatest mistake of his life. But here's the thing they both understood. The bomb wasn't the problem. The problem was that once it became possible, it became inevitable, and we're still living in that world. So let me ask you this. If the scientists in 1942 had known Germany gave up on the bomb, if they'd known the race was already over, would they have stopped? Or would they have kept building anyway? Because the logic of fear is stronger than the logic of safety. Drop your answer below. Because history doesn't give us answers. It just shows us the pattern. And whether we repeat it, that's on us.